"Oh my God, I'm sorry," Rose screamed, her eyes wide with panic. She was clutching the arm of the man beside her with such intensity that it must have hurt. But she was beyond caring. She had never been on a plane before. And now, with the cabin rattling, the air thinning, and the world far below her, she was certain she was going to die. The seatbelt felt tight, and no matter how much she tried to control her breathing, it felt like the walls of the tiny plane were closing in. Her fingers dug into the man's arm, her heart racing as the turbulence bounced the plane in every direction. She hadn't even been able to hold onto the seat in front of her. Her legs had been flailing uncontrollably. Her hands, however, had found a much wronger place to grab. She hadn't meant to, of course. It had just happened. In the chaos of her panic, she hadn't noticed that her hand had moved, and before she knew it, she was holding onto the very muscular arm of the tall, well-dressed man beside her. The man, on the other hand, had gone stiff as a board. He was trying to maintain his composure, but it was clear his mind was somewhere between confusion and shock. The entire row was silent except for Rose's frantic gasps for air. The man slowly turned his head towards her, his icy blue eyes wide. His voice was a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Please, could you?" Before he could finish his sentence, Rose pulled back with a loud yelp of embarrassment, her face turning bright red. She immediately straightened in her seat, hands on her lap. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. Oh, God, this is my first flight. I'm really not. Oh, I'm so embarrassed," she stammered, fumbling with her seatbelt, as if that would somehow fix the awkwardness of the situation. The man, who had somehow managed to remain relatively calm despite the chaos of the plane, gave a short, startled laugh. "It's okay," he said, his voice still calm, but with a hint of amusement. "Really, it's not the worst thing that's happened to me today." Rose glanced over at him, her mind still foggy from the panic. She could tell from his perfectly tailored suit and the designer sunglasses resting on top of his dark hair that he was someone important. But her mind couldn't focus on that now. All she could think about was how she just touched him in the most inappropriate place in the middle of a panic attack. She wanted to crawl under the seat and disappear. The plane lurched again, and she clutched the armrest for dear life, eyes squeezing shut. She hadn't realized just how bad this was going to be. She was never flying again, not even if they paid her. She'd take the bus. She'd walk if she had to. Anything to avoid this. The man beside her let out a long breath. He wasn't exactly what you'd call uncomfortable, but his patience was being stretched thin. All right. Take it easy," he said, his voice steady but clearly trying to keep things light. "This is normal. It's just turbulence. We'll be fine." But Rose could barely hear him. She was shaking, staring straight ahead with her hands gripping the armrest like they were the only thing holding her together. And then, out of nowhere, his hand reached over, slowly, carefully, and placed it over hers. Rose looked at him, her wide eyes filled with confusion. "Deep breaths," he said, his voice low and calming. "Just focus on the air, the flow. In and out. It's okay. I've been through this 100 times. You'll be fine." For some reason, hearing his words seemed to work. Her breathing slowed, though her heart was still pounding. She tried to focus on his words instead of the storm outside, and as strange as it seemed, the warmth of his hand on hers felt comforting. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, still mortified by the whole situation. "I didn't mean to grab you like that. I promise, I'm not usually like this." He gave her a soft smile. "I know you're not. It's all right." His eyes twinkled a little, as if he found the whole thing mildly amusing, though his smile was kind. "And, to be fair, you're not the first person to do that." Her face turned even redder, and she immediately looked down at her lap, unable to look at him for more than a second. The plane was still shaking, but the worst of the turbulence seemed to have passed. Slowly, Rose let go of the armrest, realizing with a start that her fingers were still wrapped around his hand. She pulled back quickly, mortified. "I'm so sorry again. She scrambled to adjust in her seat, but her brain was still too fuzzy. The panic still hadn't fully left her body, but the man's presence had begun to feel somewhat calming, despite the awkwardness. He chuckled softly. "It's fine," he said again. You're not going to break me. She looked up at him, her mouth parting to speak, but before she could, the flight attendants made their way down the aisle, delivering drinks and checking on the passengers. The moment of tension seemed to pass as Rose focused on the flight attendants, trying to shake off the feeling of absolute embarrassment. Then, as if the universe wanted to throw another curveball her way, the man beside her, who she now realized hadn't introduced himself, moved to adjust his seatbelt. He shifted slightly, and his phone fell from the pocket of his suit jacket. It landed with a small thud against the floor, but what caught Rose's attention was the logo on the back of his phone. The logo of one of the wealthiest tech companies in the world. Her eyes widened as she stared at it, slowly realizing exactly who she was sitting next to. The panic attack, the hand-holding, the awkwardness, all of it was suddenly a million times worse. She hadn't just grabbed some random man's arm. She had grabbed the arm of Alex Hargrove, the CEO of Hargrove Technologies. The very same Alex Hargrove who had been in the news for years, known for his high-profile business deals and billionaire status. And now she was just sitting next to him. Her mind was spinning, and she could barely comprehend what had just happened. How was she supposed to react to that? What was she supposed to do? Before she could say anything, the plane hit another small bump, causing her to grab onto the armrest again out of reflex. But this time, she didn't grab his arm. This time she grabbed, well, somewhere else entirely. Her face went white. The moment Rose realized where her hand had landed, she froze. Her heart skipped a beat, and everything went into slow motion. It was as if the universe had conspired against her in the worst possible way. The man next to her, Alex Hargrove, had been kind, patient, and understanding so far. But now, in the most awkward turn of events, she was grabbing, well, his leg. Her fingers immediately jerked back, and she gasped in horror. Oh my God! Her face burned redder than it had ever been in her life. Alex, still calm as ever, looked at her with a surprised but not entirely shocked expression. His eyes were still those striking icy blues, but there was no anger, only a bit of amusement dancing behind them. He cleared his throat. You okay there? Rose's mind was a blur. The plane shook a little again, but it didn't matter. She couldn't focus on the turbulence. All she could focus on was the fact that she had just grabbed his leg in an attempt to stabilize herself during the flight's little bump. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I swear, I don't usually, she stammered, her hands moving uncontrollably in her lap as she tried to explain herself. Alex didn't seem upset, though. He leaned back in his seat and let out a soft chuckle. Look, Rose, it's all right. I'm just glad you're still holding on to something. He smiled warmly, his voice carrying a playful tone. Though I'll admit, I wasn't expecting the leg grab. Rose could barely breathe, let alone reply. She was mortified. This couldn't be happening to her. Of all people, why did she have to sit next to him on her first ever flight? It was like a cruel joke. But then, something unexpected happened. Alex reached over, slowly and carefully, and placed his hand on her shoulder in a calming gesture. Take a deep breath, he said in his usual calm tone, his voice like a quiet anchor in the storm of her panic. We're not going down. It's just a bit of turbulence. It's normal. It was as if his words were magic. Slowly, Rose's heartbeat started to steady, and she realized she wasn't in imminent danger. Her hands, still shaking slightly, rested back on her lap. She gave him a nervous, unsure smile. I promise. I'm usually more graceful than this. Alex raised an eyebrow. Graceful, huh? You got a funny way of showing it. His teasing tone lightened the mood a little, and Rose couldn't help but laugh. Though it was a small laugh, tinged with embarrassment. Yeah, maybe not the best first impression, she admitted. First flight? He asked, his eyes glinting with curiosity. First flight, Rose confirmed. I've never had the courage to get on a plane until now. I mean, I always thought the ground was much safer, she said with a nervous chuckle. Well, you've survived the worst of it, Alex said, giving her another reassuring smile. You're doing just fine. The plane hit another bump, but this time, Rose didn't panic. She felt Alex's presence beside her, a calm anchor in the storm. For some reason, she wasn't as scared anymore. Maybe it was his confidence, or maybe it was because she felt strangely comfortable with him, even though they were complete strangers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still a bit shaky, "for not freaking out. I really don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." Alex chuckled. "Well, that's why I'm here, right? To make sure you don't lose it completely." He paused, his eyes softening. "But seriously, don't worry. A lot of people freak out their first time flying. You're not alone." As the turbulence died down, the flight attendants began offering drinks, and the tension in the cabin eased. Rose managed to relax a bit, but she was still acutely aware of how her actions must have looked to Alex. The awkwardness hung in the air like an invisible cloud. "Do you mind if I ask what you do?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "I mean, you clearly don't look like someone who's just traveling for fun." Alex's eyes twinkled, and he leaned back in his seat with a small smile. "Fair question. I'm the CEO of Hargrove Technologies." Rose blinked, her mind struggling to process what he just said. "Wait, what? You're that Hargrove?" She'd heard of him, of course. Every major tech news outlet followed his company, which specialized in artificial intelligence, automation, and cutting-edge software solutions. His name was synonymous with success, power, and an almost legendary business acumen. Alex nodded, his gaze steady. "The very same. Though, I don't usually make a big deal of it. It's just work." Rose's mind was spinning. Here she was, sitting next to one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the world. And yet, he was acting so normal, almost like a regular person. A really normal, handsome person, but still normal. "Oh my God," Rose muttered, her face turning pale. "I'm sitting next to one of the richest men in the world, and I grabbed you in the worst possible way." Alex let out a laugh that was full of warmth. "Hey, you've apologized enough. I'm not about to judge you over a little panic-induced grab. Besides, I'm used to a little more physicality when I'm on planes. You'd be surprised how many people grab me in the middle of a turbulent flight." Rose's eyes widened. "What? Not that way," he said with a wink, making her laugh. "But I've had my fair share of people clutching my arm for dear life. You're definitely not the worst." Her embarrassment started to fade, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt all flight. She couldn't believe she had just made a fool of herself in front of someone like him, but at least he wasn't acting like a jerk about it. In fact, he seemed to genuinely be enjoying the moment. "Well," Rose said, trying to get some control over her emotions, "I guess it's nice to know I'm not alone in my flight terror." Alex nodded. "Definitely not. But you'll get used to it. Flying isn't as bad as it seems. You just have to trust the process." Rose smiled weakly. "I'll try." They continued to chat for the rest of the flight, the conversation moving from awkwardness to light banter. Rose began to feel more at ease, and before she knew it, the plane was descending into their destination. Alex helped her gather her things as the plane touched down, and the flight attendants began preparing for disembarkation. Rose turned to him, her voice quieter now. "I don't know how to thank you. I would have lost it if you weren't there." Alex's gaze softened, and his lips curved into a small, reassuring smile. "You don't need to thank me. Just take it easy next time. Flying's not so bad." She nodded, but as they both stood up, Rose felt a strange sensation in her chest. This entire flight had been a roller coaster of emotions. Embarrassment, fear, and then a surprising comfort. But what shocked her the most was how comfortable she had become with him. How easy it was to talk to him, even though he was a billionaire CEO. Before she could say anything else, Alex turned to her and said, "Hey, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to be in town for a few more days. Would you be interested in grabbing coffee sometime? Maybe we can talk more about flying." His voice had a playful edge, but his eyes were sincere. Rose stared at him, still processing the invitation. She was shocked, utterly stunned. He wanted to hang out with her? After everything that had happened? "Sure," she said, her voice soft. "I'd like that." Alex smiled warmly. "Great. Let's make sure your next flight is a little less eventful." As they walked off the plane together, Rose couldn't help but wonder if this was the start of something she never expected. An encounter that had begun with panic, a grab in the wrong place, and a billionaire CEO who had somehow become the most unexpected part of her day. Rose couldn't believe what had just happened. She walked through the airport with her heart still racing, but not from fear. No, now it was excitement. She just agreed to have coffee with Alex Hargrove. The same Alex Hargrove whose name was plastered on every tech magazine, every headline, every business deal that made waves in Silicon Valley. She could still feel the warmth of his hand on hers, the calm in his voice as he reassured her through her panic. It wasn't just the fact that he was a billionaire tech mogul. It was the way he made her feel, like she wasn't just some nervous traveler, but someone worth noticing. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. You really messed up back there, she thought, but somehow he didn't run screaming. As they exited the airport, she could feel the cool breeze of the city air hit her face, and for the first time since she'd gotten on the plane, she could finally breathe again. The panic was gone, but now there was something new, curiosity, about Alex, about how they had connected in the most unexpected of ways, and about how in the world she was going to survive this coffee meeting without saying something utterly embarrassing again. "Hey, Rose." Alex called from behind her, snapping her out of her thoughts. She turned to see him walking toward her, the same calm expression still on his face as he jogged up to her. His dark suit looked effortlessly polished, even after a long flight, and his hair, well, it looked like he had just stepped out of a designer catalog. It wasn't just the way he looked, though. There was something about the way he carried himself, a natural charisma that drew people in. It was almost impossible to believe that someone like him could be so relaxed around a complete stranger. "Did you want to grab an Uber, or should we just walk?" he asked with that same easy smile. Rose blinked, still in a bit of daze. "Walk?" she asked, surprised at the suggestion. "Yeah," he said casually. "I find it easier to talk when I'm moving. Plus, it's a nice day." She glanced at him and nodded, still too flustered to argue. "Sure, walking sounds fine." They stepped outside together, and the city bustled around them. Rose had been to this city before, but never for long enough to get a feel for it. As they walked, she kept her eyes on the sidewalk, trying to avoid staring at Alex too much. She wasn't sure how to act around him. After all, he was Alex Hargrove. Her thoughts kept circling back to the ridiculousness of her first encounter with him. She had panicked and grabbed his leg for goodness sake. But somehow he was still here, walking beside her like it was the most normal thing in the world. "So, do you live here?" she asked, trying to make casual conversation. Alex smiled and nodded. "Yeah, I have a place in the city. I'm usually in and out for business, though. But I like it here. Lots of good coffee shops." Rose chuckled nervously. "Good coffee shops, huh? That's exactly what I'm looking for." He gave her a sideways glance, a knowing look in his eyes. "I figured. I got a few places in mind. You can judge whether they live up to my hype." "I'll be the judge of that," she said with a smirk. She was beginning to relax, just a little. Her nervousness was starting to ebb away as they walked, talking about their favorite foods, the quirks of flying, and even their hometowns. She learned that Alex had grown up in a small town before moving to the city to start his career. It was hard for her to imagine him as anything other than the confident CEO he was now. But it was nice to hear that he hadn't always had everything handed to him. Before long, they reached a cozy little cafe tucked away on a quiet street. It had a warm, inviting atmosphere, with candles flickering on the tables outside and a small sign that read, "Best coffee in the city." "Well, this looks promising," Rose said, glancing at Alex with a raised eyebrow. He laughed. "It better be. I'm making you judge my coffee skills, after all." They sat at a small table outside, the sun beginning to dip lower in the sky as the evening drew near. Rose noticed that even though the place was busy, it wasn't crowded, and the energy felt relaxed. It was the kind of place she liked to visit when she was alone, but now, sitting here with Alex, it felt different. The light was softer, the air warmer, and somehow the world outside seemed to fade away. So, she began, trying to sound casual. "Hargrove Technologies, huh? That's a big deal." Alex nodded, his expression unreadable for a moment. "Yeah, it is. But it wasn't always this way. It took a lot of work to get here. A lot of sleepless nights, endless meetings, and tough decisions." Rose raised an eyebrow. "I imagine. Must have been pretty lonely at times." Alex's eyes softened, and he took a sip of his coffee. "It was, a lot of the time, actually, success has a funny way of isolating you. People either want something from you, or they're intimidated by you. So, yeah, there were moments when I felt pretty alone in it." Rose didn't know what to say at first. She had no idea what it was like to be in his shoes, but she could feel the weight of his words. There was something in the way he said it, as though he wasn't just talking about business, but about life. "Well, you seem pretty down to earth, despite all that," she said, offering him a small smile. "I mean, you didn't freak out when I panicked on the plane. You actually helped me, which was surprising to say the least." Alex smiled back at her, his eyes warm. "I try to stay grounded. Not everyone gets the chance to be in my position, but when I do get the opportunity, I try to use it for good. Help people out when I can." Rose felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't expected that answer. She didn't know why, but hearing it made her feel like he wasn't just some CEO sitting across from her, but someone who genuinely cared about the world around him. "So, I guess you're not as intimidating as I first thought," she said, teasing him lightly. Alex leaned back in his chair, a playful glint in his eyes. "You think I'm intimidating?" "A little," she admitted. "I mean, everyone knows your name. You're basically a walking, talking tech empire." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't walk around with a crown on my head, if that's what you're getting at." Rose laughed at the image. "I know, but it's still hard to believe I'm sitting here with you. It feels unreal." For a moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like the world had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Rose felt something shift in her chest. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was the way Alex was looking at her, like she wasn't just some nervous girl who grabbed his leg in the middle of a panic attack. She had to admit, she was starting to feel something more than just admiration. As they talked more, the evening drifted into a comfortable, easy conversation. She learned more about Alex, his childhood, his passions, and the challenges he faced to get where he was. In turn, she shared more about herself, about her fears, her dreams, and the things that made her feel alive. And just when she thought the evening couldn't get any more pleasant, Alex leaned forward slightly, his eyes softening. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I'm glad I met you, Rose. I don't usually invite people out for coffee, but I'm glad you said yes." Rose blinked, feeling her heart skip a beat. "I'm glad I did too," she said quietly, meeting his gaze. Before she could say anything else, Alex leaned back, a little smile playing on his lips. "You know, I never expected my first flight to be this memorable," he said. Rose let out a small laugh. "Neither did I." But as the evening wore on and the city lights twinkled around them, Rose couldn't help but feel that this moment, wasn't just about a first flight or a nervous panic attack. It was the start of something much more unexpected, and she had a feeling that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. The night grew darker, and the sounds of the city seemed to melt into the background as Rose and Alex continued their conversation. The coffee shop was now quieter, the once bustling noise dimming as most of the evening crowd had left. But the world outside felt like it had stopped moving. It was just her and Alex now. Two people sharing stories, a shared silence that spoke volumes between them. Rose couldn't stop thinking about what Alex had said earlier. "I'm glad I met you." She wasn't sure why, but those words stuck with her. A billionaire CEO, someone with so many people around him, so much to do, was glad to have met her. The thought made her feel oddly warm inside, even though she knew she was just a random stranger to him. But she couldn't deny the connection she felt. "So," Alex said after a brief pause, sipping his coffee, "I know this might be a strange question, but do you ever think about what you really want out of life?" Rose blinked, surprised by the depth of the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, like beyond the everyday stuff. What do you want when it all settles down? What makes you happy?" Rose looked down in her cup, swirling the coffee inside. It was strange. She never really thought about it. She'd been so caught up in surviving, in making ends meet, in getting through the day. She didn't have the luxury of thinking about grand dreams and plans. But now, with Alex asking, she realized that maybe she hadn't truly considered what would make her feel fulfilled. "I guess I've always just wanted to do something meaningful," she said slowly. "Something that makes a difference. But I don't really know how. I always thought I'd end up working in a cafe or at a bookstore. Something simple, you know? Nothing too complicated." Alex leaned forward, his eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. "But that's the thing, Rose," he said quietly. "Simple doesn't mean insignificant. You don't have to change the world to make it better. Sometimes, just doing something that brings you joy, that helps others in small ways, can be enough. Rose looked up at him, a bit taken aback. You really believe that? Alex smiled softly, nodding. Of course. I believe that the people who change the world aren't always the ones with the biggest names or the biggest companies. They're the ones who make a difference, no matter how small, to the people they care about. Rose's heart skipped a beat. It was like Alex had tapped into something she'd buried deep inside herself. Maybe she didn't need to have some grand, world-changing goal. Maybe she could find fulfillment in helping people, in creating something good in the world, even in the small ways she could. She smiled, feeling a weight lift from her chest. That's actually kind of comforting to hear. Alex smiled back, and for the first time, Rose noticed how much his presence seemed to draw people in. It wasn't just his wealth or status. It was something deeper, something genuine. It made her wonder what kind of person he truly was behind all the success and headlines. And what about you, Alex? She asked, her curiosity bubbling up. You have all this success, but you said you still feel isolated at times. What do you really want? Alex paused, his expression shifting slightly, like he was thinking about her question carefully. Honestly, he began, his voice quieter now. I've spent so much of my life chasing success and building my company that I forgot to figure out what I actually wanted. I've been so focused on business, on making sure everything works, that I haven't stopped to think about what makes me happy outside of all this. Rose leaned in, intrigued. And what is that? He smiled wistfully. I think it's the little things. The people who actually care. Real connections. Not just people wanting something from me. I've been so caught up in this world of numbers and tech that I forgot what it's like to have a genuine, relaxed moment with someone. Rose felt something shift in her chest. It was as if he was opening up to her, letting her see a side of him no one else had. She wasn't sure if it was just the late hour or the way the conversation had flowed, but she felt a quiet connection forming between them. One that went deeper than just the strange circumstances of their first meeting. So, what would you do differently if you could? She asked, her voice soft. Alex sighed, looking out the window for a moment. I don't know. Maybe I'd take more time for myself. Maybe I'd stop chasing everything so hard and start appreciating what's in front of me. Rose didn't respond immediately. She was still processing his words. She knew what it was like to feel like you were running on a treadmill, never quite stopping to look around. But hearing Alex say that made her realize how much she had been missing too. How often she got lost in the rush of life, forgetting to enjoy the small moments that actually made everything worthwhile. You know, Rose said after a beat, I think you're onto something. Maybe it's time we both start paying attention to what really matters. Alex turned to her, a curious look in his eyes. What do you mean? Well, she started, feeling a bit more confident now. Maybe it's not about the big goals or the big wins. Maybe it's about being present, about living instead of just surviving, you know? Even with everything that's going on in our lives, we can still choose to stop and appreciate the small stuff. Alex's expression softened, and for a moment, it felt like they were both understanding each other in a way that went beyond words. You're right, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Maybe it's time I took my own advice. The waiter came by to clear their empty cups, and as he did, Alex stood up and pushed his chair back. Well, I think I've talked your ear off enough. But thank you for this, Rose. This was nice. Rose stood up, a bit surprised by the warmth she felt in her chest. No, thank you. I wasn't expecting this evening to turn into something meaningful. Alex chuckled, grabbing his jacket off the back of his chair. Well, there's always a chance to surprise yourself. As they walked to the door, Alex turned to her with a soft smile. How about this? Let's make sure we do this again sometime. Coffee, or maybe something a bit more exciting when you're ready. Rose smiled back, her heart fluttering slightly. I'd like that. They stepped outside into the cool evening air, and for the first time since meeting Alex, Rose didn't feel nervous or out of place. She didn't feel like she had to apologize for anything. She just felt right. Take care, Rose, Alex said, his tone gentle. I'll text you soon. Take care, Alex, she replied, feeling something in her chest swell. And as he walked away, she stood there for a moment, wondering how in the world she'd ended up here, sitting across from one of the most powerful men in the world and having an actual conversation with him that didn't involve business. But as she turned to head home, her mind wasn't just on the coffee, or the plane flight, or even the awkward leg grab. It was on the connection she had just started to build with Alex. And the strange, beautiful thing was, she had no idea where it would go next. Rose couldn't help but smile to herself as she walked home from the cafe. The night air was cool, the city buzzing around her, but everything felt different. Lighter. She hadn't expected that evening with Alex to feel so easy, so natural. For someone as high profile as he was, she thought he might be aloof or difficult to approach. But the real Alex, the one she saw tonight, was so much more down to earth than she'd ever imagined. She replayed the conversation over and over in her head. The way Alex had opened up about his life, his struggles, and even the things he missed out on while building his empire. It was like she had seen a side of him that no one else had ever witnessed. And in some odd way, it made her feel closer to him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out and smiled when she saw the name flashing across the screen. Alex Hargrove. She answered it quickly, her heart racing a little. Hello. Hey, Rose. Alex's voice came through, smooth and warm. I just wanted to check in. How was your walk home? Safe, I hope. Yeah, it was great. I'm actually just walking through my neighborhood now. It's kind of nice to have some quiet after all the excitement. He chuckled lightly. I can imagine. I was thinking about what we talked about earlier, about how sometimes you just need to stop and appreciate what's right in front of you. And I realized something. Oh, Rose said, curious. You've got a point, he continued, his voice getting more serious. I've been so consumed with work that I forgot what it's like to slow down, to really live and not just exist in a whirlwind of meetings and deadlines. She didn't know why, but hearing him admit that made her feel a little more connected to him. I get that. I mean, I don't have a company to run, but I've been so focused on making ends meet, I've forgotten to enjoy the small moments too. There was a brief pause, and Rose could hear him taking a deep breath on the other end. Maybe that's why I invited you out for coffee tonight, Alex said softly. It wasn't just about the coffee or the fact that you've never flown before. It was because I wanted to take a break. Spend some time with someone who doesn't want anything from me. Rose felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected him to open up like this. She'd known there was a difference between the public Alex, the one who was always in control, and the man she'd met that evening. But hearing him admit how isolated he sometimes felt made her heart ache. Alex, he interrupted her before she could say more. I'm sorry if I'm being too forward. I just wanted you to know that I really appreciate our conversation. And honestly, it's been a long time since I've met someone who made me feel this comfortable. Rose's breath caught in her chest. Was this really happening? A billionaire CEO, someone who had the world at his feet, was telling her that she made him feel comfortable? It felt surreal. You're not being forward, she finally managed to say. I'm glad we met too. I wasn't expecting tonight to go the way it did. It's been, honestly, kind of relief. Alex paused again. A relief, huh? You're not just talking about the coffee, are you? Rose laughed softly, the tension in her chest easing a little. No, not just the coffee. Good, he said, sounding like he was grinning. Because I was hoping you might be up for something a little more adventurous next time we meet. How about a weekend trip? You've never really been to the mountains, right? The offer caught her completely off guard. A weekend trip? Are you serious? He sounded sincere. I know it's sudden, but I'd love for you to join me for a quick getaway. I think you could use some fresh air, and maybe we could both use a little time away from everything. It will be just a small trip, nothing too formal. Rose blinked, her mind swirling. This was Alex Hargrove, the man who could literally go anywhere, do anything. He could have anyone with him, and yet he was asking her. A nervous, anxious woman who had nearly caused a disaster on their flight. Wow, she whispered, trying to wrap her mind around the offer. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say yes right away, Alex said, his tone light, but there was an undertone of something more serious there. I just thought it could be a nice way to take a break. Get to know each other better. I know we just met, but I feel like we've connected in a way I haven't in a long time. She was speechless for a moment, her thoughts racing. This wasn't just some casual invitation. It was Alex offering her a chance to step into a world she never imagined. A world that she hadn't thought she belonged in. And yet, there was something about his sincerity that made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she did. I think I like that, Rose said, finally breaking the silence. I mean, I've never been on a trip like that before, but it sounds nice. Actually, it sounds really nice. Alex's voice brightened, as if he was relieved she hadn't turned him down flat. Great. I'll get everything arranged. Just pack a bag, and I'll handle the details. You won't have to worry about a thing. Okay, she replied, a smile tugging at her lips. You've got yourself a travel companion, then. As they wrapped up the conversation and Alex promised to text her the details soon, Rose couldn't help but feel a little giddy. She was going on a weekend trip with Alex Hargrove, the same man who had kept her calm on that chaotic flight, the same man who had offered her not just an escape, but a chance to experience something completely different from her normal life. It was exciting, and for once, it felt like something could happen that was completely out of her control, but in a good way. The days flew by in a blur of preparation, and before Rose knew it, she was standing in front of her apartment building, waiting for Alex's driver to arrive. She had packed a small bag, just the essentials, and was feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. This trip felt like a new chapter in her life, something she never expected. And yet, here she was, about to take the first step into a world of luxury and adventure she had never dreamed of. When the black car arrived, Alex was waiting in the back seat. He smiled when he saw her and waved her over. Ready for this? He asked as she climbed in. Ready as I'll ever be, she said, trying to hide her nervousness. As they drove out of the city, heading toward the mountains, Rose couldn't help but wonder what would come next. It wasn't just the trip she was thinking about. It was everything that had led her to this point, the flight, the coffee, the connection they had shared. Was this just a one-time thing, or was it something more? The car rolled along the winding roads, and Alex turned to her with a small grin. You know, I never expected that a first flight would lead to a weekend getaway, but I'm glad it did. Rose smiled, her eyes meeting his. Me too. The car drove on, and as the city lights faded behind them, she couldn't help but feel like this was just the beginning of something neither of them had planned. The drive to the mountains was beautiful, the landscape gradually changing from city skyscrapers and crowded streets to vast stretches of greenery and winding roads. The sky overhead was a brilliant shade of blue, and the air, as they moved farther from the city, grew fresher and cooler. Rose sat back in the car, letting the soft hum of the engine lull her into a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in a long time. Alex seemed more at ease too, his usual confident, business-driven demeanor replaced with something gentler, something more relaxed. The conversation flowed easily between them, talking about their favorite books, places they'd like to visit, and even their childhood memories. It was nice. It was simple. And for the first time in a long while, Rose felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Do you ever miss being normal? Rose asked, her voice soft. She couldn't help but ask. It had been nagging at her for a while. She glanced over at Alex, his eyes on the road, but his expression thoughtful. Normal, he repeated with a chuckle. What do you mean by that? You know, Rose said, looking out the window, just having a simple life. Being able to go to the store without being recognized, or sitting in a cafe without people staring at you. Do you ever miss that kind of anonymity? Alex was quiet for a moment. I miss it sometimes, he admitted, but I also know I can't have it anymore. My life is, well, it's public. Everything I do, every move I make, it's watched. I've learned to accept that. That sounds exhausting, Rose said. She could see how that kind of life would wear someone down. Always being in the spotlight, never having a moment just to yourself. Do you ever wish you could just escape? Be someone else for a while? He glanced at her, his eyes softening. Sometimes, but then I think about the people I've met along the way, the things I've done. I don't think I'd be happy if I lived a different life. Maybe it's not easy, but it's mine. He paused, a slight smile forming on his lips. And I've learned to make the best of it. It's not about the fame or the fortune. It's about what you do with it. Rose nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had always wanted something more, something beyond the life she had been living, But hearing Alex talk like this made her think about how important it was to make the most of what you had. And just like that, the car pulled into a long, winding driveway lined with towering trees. In the distance, Rose could see a large cabin nestled in the heart of the mountains. The place was secluded, serene, and surrounded by nature, a far cry from the chaotic city they had just left behind. "We're here," Alex said, a little excited, as he pulled up to the cabin's entrance. Rose's jaw dropped as she took in view. The cabin was everything she hadn't expected: warm, inviting, and rustic, with large windows offering panoramic views of the mountains. It looked like something straight out of a luxury retreat advertisement. "Wow," she breathed, her eyes wide. "This is incredible." Alex smiled as he parked the car. "I'm glad you like it. This is my favorite place to get away when I need to clear my head." As they stepped out of the car, the cool mountain air hit Rose's face fresh and crisp. She breathed it in deeply, feeling the weight of the city lift off her shoulders. This was a place where she could breathe, think, and just be. "Come on, I'll show you around," Alex said, offering her his arm as they walked toward the cabin's front door. Inside, the cabin was even more stunning. The walls were made of natural wood, the floors polished oak, and the space was open, with high ceilings and large beams. There was a cozy stone fireplace in the living room and soft, plush furniture that made the place feel both luxurious and comforting. Large windows framed the sweeping views of the mountains outside. "This is amazing, Alex," Rose said, still in awe. "It feels like a dream." Alex smiled, looking pleased. "I wanted you to experience something different, Rose. I know it's not what you expected when you agreed to the coffee, but I hope it's something you'll remember." She looked at him, the warmth of the cabin contrasting with the cool air outside. "I'm already starting to remember it," she said softly. "In a good way." Alex smiled at her, his eyes softening. There was a quiet moment between them, where nothing seemed rushed or forced. The world outside was calm, the only sounds the rustling of the trees and the crackling of the fireplace. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly, his voice sincere. Rose felt a strange flutter in her chest. She hadn't expected to feel this connected to him, to have such an easy time talking and laughing with someone who lived in a world so different from hers. But here she was, sitting next to Alex Hargrove, feeling like she belonged. And for once, she wasn't worrying about what was next or what would happen. She was just present. "I'm glad too," she replied, a smile tugging at her lips. The evening went by in a comfortable haze. They cooked dinner together. Well, mostly Alex cooked, while Rose tried to follow his instructions without burning anything. They ate by the fire, and after dinner, Alex poured them both glasses of wine as they sat on the plush couch, talking about everything and nothing at all. At some point, Rose noticed how comfortable they both were. It wasn't just about the luxurious setting. It was about the way they could talk to each other. There were no pretenses, no barriers. It was just two people enjoying each other's company, with the promise of a peaceful night ahead. "So," Alex began, breaking the silence, "what's next for you, Rose? After this trip, I mean." She tilted her head, considering the question. She'd never thought about the future in the way Alex was asking. Usually, she was focused on getting through the next day, the next week. But this question felt different. It felt like a chance to think about what she wanted without the weight of obligations or expectations. "I don't know," she said slowly, looking into her glass of wine. "I've spent so much time just getting by that I haven't really figured out what I want. I guess I want to find something I'm passionate about, something that makes me feel alive." Alex's gaze softened, and he set his glass down before turning to her fully. "And what's stopping you?" Rose paused, the question sinking in. What was stopping her? She hadn't allowed herself to really dream, to really want something. But now, in this moment, with Alex's gentle encouragement, she could see a path forward. "I don't know," she said, her voice quiet. "I think I've just been too afraid to take the first step." Alex smiled, his eyes warm. "Then maybe this is your first step." Rose looked at him, the weight of his words slowly sinking in. Maybe this trip wasn't just a break. Maybe it was an opportunity, a chance to rethink everything, to choose her own direction. For once, it wasn't about surviving. It was about choosing to live. As the night wore on and the fire burned low, Rose felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. She wasn't just in the mountains. She was with someone who saw her, who cared about what she wanted, and who was encouraging her to take the first step towards something better. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, the sun rose over the mountains in a soft, golden haze. Rose stood at the large window, looking out at the quiet beauty of the landscape. It was peaceful here, away from the chaos of her normal life. Alex stood beside her, his presence warm and steady. He didn't say anything, just stood there, letting the silence speak for itself. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," Alex agreed. "It is." And as they stood there together, in the quiet of the morning, Rose realized that she wasn't just looking at the view. She was looking at a future, one that felt full of possibility. The morning light filtered gently through the trees, casting soft shadows on the wooden floors of the cabin. Rose couldn't remember the last time she felt so at peace, so free from the worries that had constantly clouded her mind. The mountains outside were still, serene, and for the first time in a long while, Rose didn't feel like she was running from something. She was simply existing, breathing in the fresh, crisp air and appreciating the quiet beauty around her. Alex stood beside her, his presence calm and steady. There was no rush in the way he moved, no urgency to the way he spoke. He seemed perfectly content with the silence, as though he didn't need to fill the space with words to make it meaningful. "I can't believe I'm here," Rose said softly, her gaze still fixed on the view. "It feels like a dream." Alex chuckled quietly. "I get that. The first time I came here, I felt the same way. It's hard to believe such a place exists, especially when you're used to the city hustle." Rose glanced over at him, his face illuminated by the soft morning light. He looked different out here, more relaxed, less like the business mogul she had read about in the papers, and more like, well, just a person. She didn't know how to explain it, but she felt like she was seeing a side of him that the world didn't get to see. "How often do you come here?" she asked, turning her attention back to the peaceful landscape. "Whenever I can," Alex said, his voice warm. "I don't come here nearly as much as I should, but when I do, it's like hitting the reset button. It helps me clear my head, you know? Reminds me of what's important." Rose nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She had always been so focused on surviving, on getting by, on paying bills, on making sure everything was in place, that she'd forgotten how to take a step back. Maybe that was what this trip was, she realized. A reset, a chance to breathe and reevaluate everything. "Are you planning to stay here for long?" she asked, curiosity slipping into her voice. "For a few more days," Alex replied, "but I'll be back to work soon enough. You know how it is, the grind doesn't stop." His voice took on a light-hearted tone, though I'm pretty sure I could get used to this view. Rose smiled, feeling a warm comfort settle over her. The cabin, the mountains, the time spent away from everything. It was all starting to feel like a dream. A good dream. But it's more than just the view, right? Rose said, her voice soft. "It's the peace." Alex's gaze softened, his eyes locking with hers. "Yeah, the peace." There was a long moment of quiet between them, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Rose was surprised at how easy it was to talk to him. She had never imagined that a weekend getaway with someone she barely knew could be so effortless. But with Alex, it felt like they were two people who had known each other for much longer. "You know, I'm really glad I came here with you," Rose said quietly, her voice almost vulnerable. "I didn't expect any of this. I didn't even expect to like you after the flight." Alex smiled, a little laugh escaping him. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to grab my leg either." Rose laughed, a little embarrassed. "I know, I'm sorry about that. I swear, I don't usually panic that much." "I didn't mind," he said, his tone light and teasing. "It was memorable." Rose looked over at him, and their eyes met for a moment. There was something in his gaze that made her heart flutter. Something kind, something genuine. It was like the connection they had felt during their flight had only deepened since then. He wasn't just a rich CEO or some stranger she had met by accident. He was someone she felt she could be herself with. Someone who saw her, not just as the woman who had panicked on the plane, but as someone who had a lot to offer the world. "I'm glad I grabbed your leg then," Rose said, her voice playful. Alex raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what's your plan now? Grab my arm again?" "Maybe," she teased, "but only if you're willing to survive another panic attack." Alex grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I think I can handle it. And if not, I'm pretty sure you've got a pretty good grip on me now." Rose laughed, shaking her head. "I think I'm getting better at this flying thing." "Good. Maybe next time, we'll even fly somewhere fun," Alex said, his tone light, but with a hint of something more serious beneath it. Rose looked at him, her heart racing a little at the thought. A trip to somewhere fun? With Alex? The idea seemed impossible. But the more she thought about it, the more it didn't seem so far-fetched. They had just spent the last 24 hours talking, laughing, and finding comfort in each other's presence. It didn't feel like a fleeting connection. It felt real. The quiet moment between them stretched on, filled only by the distant chirp of birds and the soft rustling of the trees. Rose couldn't help but wonder where this would lead. She hadn't expected any of this. The trip, the connection, even the brief touch of his hand on hers during the flight. She had been so focused on her own life, her own struggles, that she hadn't imagined a weekend like this. Something so simple, yet so profound. "I think I could get used to this," Rose said after a while, her voice soft but confident. Alex turned his gaze to her, his expression shifting slightly. He stepped closer, the space between them now almost non-existent. His gaze was intense, but it wasn't demanding. It was thoughtful. "What exactly do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice quiet. Rose looked into his eyes, feeling the weight of his question. There was something in his gaze, something that pulled her closer. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was right where she needed to be. "I mean, this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This peace, this moment, being here with you." There was a brief pause before Alex spoke again, his words slower now, more deliberate. "I'm glad you feel that way," he said softly, "because I'm starting to think that maybe we both need to stop running." The words hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Rose felt her heart race, her emotions swirling. What was he saying? Did he mean what she thought he meant? Did this weekend mean something more than just two people passing time in a cabin? "I'm not running," she replied, her voice steady but her heart thudding in her chest. "Good," Alex said, his voice low and sincere. "Because I think I found something here. Something I wasn't looking for. And I think it's worth sticking around for." Rose's breath caught in her throat. Did he mean that? "I don't know what this is yet," Alex continued, his words careful. "But I want to find out. With you." Rose felt a wave of warmth wash over her. It wasn't just the cabin or the mountains or the serene air. It was him. It was the connection they had built, the way they understood each other, the way they fit together without even trying. She stepped closer to him, her eyes locked with his. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something shift inside her, something deeper than just admiration or even attraction. It was something real. "I think I'm ready to find out too," she whispered. Before either of them could say another word, Alex reached for her hand, his grip gentle but firm. And as the sun rose higher, casting its golden light over the mountains, Rose realized something she hadn't allowed herself to think about before. This wasn't just a weekend getaway. This was the start of something neither of them had planned. And for the first time, Rose wasn't afraid to see where it would go. The days that followed their time in the mountains felt like they belonged to a different world. Rose had never imagined that a simple weekend trip could shift the course of her life so completely. The quiet moments they shared by the fire, the long walks through the woods, and the peaceful conversations about everything and nothing had become the foundation of something unexpected, yet entirely real. Back in the city, life slowly started to find a new rhythm. Rose returned to her apartment, but the bustle of her daily routine no longer felt as overwhelming. She carried with her the lessons she had learned in those quiet moments with Alex. How to slow down, how to appreciate the small things, and, most importantly, how to believe in herself and what she wanted from life. As for Alex, his presence was never far from her thoughts. The connection they had formed, the way they understood each other without needing to explain everything, was something she had never experienced before. It wasn't just about the luxury of the cabin or the breathtaking views of the mountains. It was about them, about how they made each other feel, how they both wanted something more than what they had been running toward. One evening, about a week after they returned to the city, Alex texted her. "Alex, I've been thinking. Would you like to join me for dinner tonight? Somewhere quiet, just the two of us." Rose smiled when she saw the message, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't expected him to reach out so soon, but the warmth in his words made her feel a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in a while. "Rose, I'd like that. Where are we going?" "Alex, it's a surprise. I'll pick you up at 7. When the clock struck 7, Rose was ready. She had spent the last few hours thinking about how much her life had changed in such a short time. A month ago, she would never have imagined herself dining with a billionaire CEO, but tonight felt different. It felt like it was about more than just the wealth, the company, or the status. It was about the connection they shared. The doorbell rang, and Rose's heart fluttered again. She opened the door to find Alex standing there, dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the powerful CEO he was, but with a softness in his eyes that made him look approachable, almost human. "Ready for the night?" he asked, his voice light, with a smile that made her heart skip. She nodded, feeling a rush of warmth flood her cheeks. "Yeah, let's go." As they walked to the car, Rose noticed the small details, the way Alex held the door open for her, the way he listened intently when she spoke like nothing else mattered in that moment. It was as if all the noise of the world around them faded away, and it was just them, together, on a new journey. The car ride to the restaurant was filled with easy conversation. Alex had chosen a small, quiet Italian restaurant on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't the kind of place people would notice, and that was exactly why he had chosen it. No cameras, no attention, just two people who wanted to enjoy each other's company without the weight of the world watching. Inside, the restaurant was intimate, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. They were seated at a corner table by the window, where they could watch the city lights twinkle far below them. The waiter brought them wine, and they toasted to the evening. "So," Rose said after a few moments, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass, "this is quite the surprise. I didn't expect something like this." Alex smiled, his gaze soft. "I wanted to do something special, something just for us." She blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his words. It was clear that this wasn't just a casual dinner. He was doing this because he wanted to, because, like her, he had begun to realize that life could be about more than just success and business deals. They spent the evening talking about everything, about their hopes for the future, the things that kept them up at night, and the small joys that made life worth living. Rose found herself laughing more than she had in years, and she realized that being with Alex felt natural, like she had known him for much longer than just a few weeks. As the meal came to an end, Alex set down his fork and looked at her with a seriousness in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about something lately, about what we've talked about how we're both learning to slow down and appreciate the moments that really matter. And I think I want to keep doing that. With you." Rose felt her breath catch in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say anything like this, but as the words sunk in, she realized she felt the same way. The last month had been a whirlwind, unexpected and unpredictable, but it had shown her something important, that she didn't need to rush through life anymore. She didn't need to settle for less than what she truly wanted. "I think I like that too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "Then let's take it one step at a time, together." Rose's heart raced. She didn't need grand gestures or promises of forever. What she needed was right here in front of her, someone who was willing to take things slow, to build something real, and to see her for who she was. And in that moment, she realized that she was ready for that, ready to take the chance, to embrace the unknown, and to see where this path with Alex would lead. As they left the restaurant and walked back to the car, the city lights shining brightly above them, Rose couldn't help but feel like she was stepping into something new, something exciting. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. As they drove through the city, the warmth of Alex's hand still resting gently in hers, Rose knew that her life was no longer defined by the things that held her back. It was defined by the choices she made, the moments she embraced, and the person she had become in this unexpected journey. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something that would last far beyond what either of them could predict.